The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network.
Welcome to the Leadership Evolution Podcast, where we explore what happens after the build. I'm Luke Mickelson, founder, leader, and someone who's walked through the challenges of growing an organization, letting go, and learning how to lead in a completely new way. This podcast is for founders, executives, and leaders who are navigating growth, identity, and the tension between control and legacy. Because building something great is only the beginning. Learning how to evolve with it, that's the real work. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, back to the Leadership Evolution Podcast. I'm Luke, your host. I hope you know who I am. I hope you're listening. This is awesome. And I'm so excited for today's guest, Mr. Larry Toole. Let me share a little bit of the bio on Larry. He's the founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company, one of America's most respected moving companies and a nationally recognized example of value-driven leadership. What began in 1980 with a single truck and a simple philosophy that the quality of a company is determined by the people it hires, has grown into an organization renowned for exceptional customer service, a remarkable workplace culture, and an unwavering standard. Without industry experience, outside investors, or a traditional business plan, Larry built Gentle Giant by refusing to compromise on character, his belief that hiring the right people is the foundation of every successful organization, and has allowed the company to scale while preserving the culture that made it successful from the beginning. In his book, Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, Larry shares particular and practical leadership lessons on building strong teams, protecting culture during growth, and creating organizations that endure. His story is a powerful reminder, everybody, that great leadership isn't about moving fast. It's about building people who can carry the mission forward. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a lot. You know, when I read your profile and read your model, I can't help but I'd like to think I emanate the same type of quality, right? You know, the passion that people have for what we're doing. And you know, you have taken, and I love the fact that you came from and built in an industry that you really had no knowledge about, correct?
Correct.
So how did you fall into that? I mean, take us down that road, brother.
Okay, well, I graduated from Northeastern in engineering, and I worked during my 20s for Eaton Corporation. And they had me in a they called it an intern program. It was kind of a executive development program where they'd move you every 3 to 6 months to different locations. Mm-hmm. So I got to see how even within the same corporation, the culture varied from one place to the other. Mm-hmm. And when I had a great experience, it was because I had a great boss. And if I had a great boss, chances are the culture there was exemplary. Mm-hmm. And if I had a terrible boss, the same thing. The culture was kind of lukewarm, people were not committed to excellence, etc. So it sort of inspired me to want to start my own business, especially since a friend of mine back in Boston had come up with a product. He's somebody I knew in college. And the idea was to find a way to manufacture, market, and sell that. So when I came back to Boston, I basically dove into that. But of course, it takes a while before you get any money coming in the door. Sure. So I had to pick up, I got a low-cost lifestyle, you know, was back in the days of rent control. And I was able to, just by working here and there, pay the bills. while we were getting this other thing off the ground. But it turned out I had a roommate who, kept telling me I should do moving. And then one day there was a party, and lo and behold, his girlfriend asked me to dance. So I'm dancing with his girlfriend, and I'm saying, "How come you're not dancing with Hugh?" And she said, "Well, he's very shy. I love to dance, but he will not get on the dance floor." And I said to her, I said, "Listen, I'll get him out here." And she said, "No, it can't be done." So I said, "You just keep dancing and he'll come out and join you." So she's dancing there looking a little confused. I came up behind him. He was sitting in a chair, and I picked him up and I brought him out on the floor and I danced him. I just swung him around because he's a smaller guy, and I was a D1 rower. I was on the rowing team, so I was strong. Oh, wow. So I swinging him back and forth. And he was a good sport about it, and he was just doing marionette moves. And when I put him down, he stayed out there dancing. So the next day, he said to me, he said, "You know what? It wasn't just that you picked me up." He said, "It was comfortable. I didn't feel like a dead body being dragged around the place. It was like I was paragliding." He said, "You know who you are?" He said, "You're the Gentle Giant. That's the name of your moving company." And I said, "Okay, whatever." So guess what? He took out an ad for $17 that said Gentle Giant and our phone number under the moving section. And somebody called. I didn't even know he had done this. And he gives me the phone and he says, "Okay, this is your first customer." I said, "What are you talking about? I don't even have a truck." And he says, "Look, you can borrow my van." I said, "I don't even know what to charge." And he said, "Why don't you charge $13 an hour and give me $3 for the van?" And so I went out and talked to this young woman, met her, moved her. She was a dancer. She was fit and strong, so she worked just as hard as I did, got her moved in 2 hours. And lo and behold, moved her for 6 more times, the last time in 2012, and the cost was $12,500 for the same person I moved, 32 years previously for, $25. So that's how I got started, and I was just doing it as a sideline. But what got me deciding to switch from engineering, apart from the fact that my friend got married, his wife got pregnant, and he took a full-time job, so he was really only doing part-time. So that's what basically got me thinking about starting a moving company, because every customer I moved would tell me about the terrible experiences they'd had with movers. And hearing stories like one customer, the mover showed up, loaded the stuff, and then never showed up at the new home. They called the police, they found the truck abandoned, and all their belongings had been stolen. So that's the worst moving story you could ever hear.
Right. Sure.
It's the one that tipped me over the edge and made me think, you know what, I can do better than this.
Wow.
Apart from the fact that I loved it. I loved moving. I loved meeting the people and solving the problems. And I love the fact that at the end of every day, there's a sense of accomplishment. I remember when I was an engineer, very often you couldn't figure out what you'd accomplished. But that was a great feeling. And I decided to sort of go all in with moving, and I decided to take a couple of years and give it 100% and see what happened. And I had goals to make in those 2 years, and basically every job I did, the phone would ring off the hook with referrals. And 5 years later, we were in the Inc. 500. So, wow. And that was without advertising, without marketing. We didn't even have a uniform. We just had our name. Yeah. We since developed a logo and everything. But so that's what got me into it.
I love the fact that you went and got him on the dance floor, but he got you into business. That's great.
Right.
You both picked each other up.
and we just moved him and his wife a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
You probably didn't charge him $13 an hour.
No. I wasn't even involved, so I don't think he was even looking for a break, to be honest. But different woman than the one I danced with. But but yeah, that's. But here's the thing: was really what to do after that, because that we were close to $3 million. But I had taken on a partner. One of the guys that worked for me graduated from BU with a master's in business, and I asked him if he'd be interested in a partnership, and expecting him to say no way, because he was interviewing with big ass companies. Mm-hmm. But he said sure, and we agreed on a 30-70 split, and so he was able to do all the things that I wanted nothing to do with, the payroll, receivables, all the organizational stuff. And I just focused on hiring, training, sales, and actually executing the jobs. That was my focus. And then 5 years later, we were 3 million. And he then said, we shouldn't get too big, because to his mind, we were very profitable. This was very sustainable. We were making good money, and if we grew, all we were going to do was increase our costs and put ourselves in a position of losing money. So it was sort of a very difficult decision to decide whether to grow. And what really made my mind up was the people I was surrounded with, because none of these people had come on board with the idea that they wanted to be movers. They all had other careers in mind and just needed money in the short term while they were finishing grad school or training for a national team or something like that. But hell, they were still there 3 or 4 years later, even though they only...
That's what I wanted to ask you, Larry. It seems like you have a philosophy that always has been that who you hire determines everything, right? So,
exactly.
Where did that come from? And how did that shape, every major decision you've made since?
Well, I'd like to think that, it's just common sense, but,
it's not, by the way.
When I was back in Ireland celebrating my grandfather's 100th birthday, and I told him I had switched from engineering and was starting a moving business, he said, the most important decision you're going to make is the first person you hire, because that person will set the standard. I mean, and if they don't have those high standards, get rid of them and get someone else. But he said the first person you hire sets the standard, and everybody else that comes along after that has to meet it. And he said, County Clare in the west of Ireland, he said, if you piss in your soup, you'll not get it out.
That's about right. About right.
And over the years, as other business owners have talked to me about how to solve problems, most of those problems are the result of some toxic person in their organization who they don't think they can get rid of because they have a lot of expertise or something like that. And I never say to them, well, I can't take piss out of soup. But, you try your best to give them good advice. Yeah. But like this morning, we hired 6 new hires, and I brought them over to Harvard Stadium, and they had to run all 37 sections. And what I said to them beforehand was, welcome to Gentle Giant, and my pledge to you is that I will give you nice people to work with. So you will look forward to coming to work every day. Because that's the truth. I mean, when people head into work, they're either looking forward to it or not. Or they're worried, who will I be working with today? Will it be a friend, somebody I like, or will it be some jerk? Or will it be somebody who's got low standards and just wants me to slow down and not show them up? Or is it going to be somebody that's committed to excellence, that I can be proud to be a part of the same team? And that's my commitment to them. And how do I do that? It's you avoid hiring the wrong people.
Yeah. It just seems like many organizations, they have incredible culture and they like yours, and they've had it in the early years, but they don't want to lose it as they grow, right? It seems like, how have you, let's see, intentionally protected your culture through decades of expansion?
Well, the way I've done it, and, people make excuses for why you can't do it, is I promote from within. And so we have 26 offices, and they're all run by people who started at entry level. Now, we put people through a lot of leadership training, etc. But the most important thing is they've been through our culture. They understand our culture. And wherever they are, whether it's Seattle or Charlotte or Philadelphia or wherever, they know what our core values are, and they are absolutely focused on maintaining that. So, and that's how we get our success, is because our customers expect a certain thing from us, and that's what they get. So the most important thing about people running our offices is that they understand our culture and they're willing to be absolutely committed to it. And I think other companies are maybe confused by why they can't do that, but the reason's simple. They are focused on the bottom line. They're focused on profit. And in our business, for instance, there's times when you can book more work because it's busy. And there's a real temptation then to lower your standard because that way you can take on more work and you can sort of give your less qualified crews the easier jobs. And then when you're moving a VIP, you can put your A team there. But to me, when we move a VIP, I don't worry about who's on the job because every crew is going to be consistently the same. So I think it comes down to people, number one, dropping their standards, and number two, hiring for the what's on the paper, the qualifications of as opposed to the character of the person. Yeah. Because you can show people how to do things. For instance, I at one point had to hire a CFO. Now, quickly to explain why that was because the partner I told you about wasn't comfortable with the growth and asked me to buy him out. And one reason was that he felt if we were going to be a big company, he wasn't the kind of person to be a CFO of a big company. He has a mind like a comptroller. And that was 26 years ago. And guess what? He still works here. But anyway, I had to hire a CFO, and I hired a guy who was fantastic. But he was 59 years old, and he said, look, I want to work for 10 years. Just, I want to retire in 10 years.
Sure.
And when I took him on board, I said, okay, I'm looking forward to having you on the team. But you must remember, you have two jobs. One is to be the CFO of our company, and the other is, by the time you leave in 10 years, I want this young man, Adrian, to be the CFO. So you've got 10 years to do that, and I'll give you 4 months to decide whether you think Adrian is capable of it. 4 months later, he said he did think he was. Now, Adrian was a guy who came in entry level, worked as a mover and a receptionist. Eventually moved him into finance, where he was working with my former partner. But talking about promoting from within, Adrian became the CFO about 9 years ago and has done an absolutely fantastic job. And, when I advertised for a CFO, I had 60 or 70 people applying that knew about our reputation in the local environment. And most of them were gainfully employed, but they wanted to work for us.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. The guy I hired because I knew he'd stick around. Some of these other people, although they were incredibly impressive, my worry was that we wouldn't be growing fast enough for what they wanted in their life. And
Gotcha.
we're somewhere in the 65 million area at the moment.
Incredible.
Which is modest enough when you consider that's over so many years. But I think a lot of people would have wanted, because we could be a lot bigger if we just went around. I could open an office in any city with our brand. I could advertise for somebody who had experience running an outfit and tell them to go out and get it done and hire people. And we could be $500 million. But no, we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
And we're offering consistency.
Well, as I did a little study on you, Larry, it's obvious you're known for never compromising your hiring standards.
Right.
Can you share a time maybe when saying no to the wrong person cost you maybe in the short term, but was beneficial, down the road?
In other words, you're saying not hiring somebody.
Yes, maybe if someone like on paper seemed to be the right person, but didn't fit your hiring standards, and maybe you needed them immediately, but by saying no to that person, in the long run, how did that pay off? You have an example of that?
Well, I think so, because in our business, compliance is a big deal.
Sure. Yeah.
Because this is the United States, which is, of course, a mess. And they have 50 states, and there's different rules in every state. So it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. One state has all kinds of different things. Like, for instance, one time we tried to open an office in Portland, Oregon, and at the time, you had to other moving companies could object and say you can't give a license to Gentle Giant because that'll affect our livelihood. They'll eat us for breakfast. I'm serious, and they were able to keep us out. That's how stupid it is. This is the United States. Yeah. And the similar hoop we had to run through in Pennsylvania, where we had to get somebody from every county to say that, yes, they wanted us. Okay, I mean, talk about nuts. So hiring a compliance person. Now, here's the thing about compliance people. They have a responsibility that things are done right. That's very difficult because you have to get drivers, to get drug tests, to get licenses, to renew this and renew that, and come to all these things. And so my experience was that in talking to other owners and around the industry, the compliance people tend not to be the most likable. Everyone hated
the guy, right?
everyone hated their guts.
Oh yeah.
So sure. I had a lot of people that applied there that
Right.
And when I finally got the person that was perfect, and is now on our leadership team, she was a person who always was gracious and upbeat and positive. Like somebody didn't do something they were supposed to do. No negativity at all. Just ask a few questions and be nice and get them to do it in a nice way, and just never I've never seen her get angry with anybody. She's just a gift from heaven. And when you get somebody like that, who just creates great relationships with everybody. So that's an example of me just saying, look, we're just going to hold off. We're not going to grow our interstate until we find that person.
The right person.
And make us know we can do it right. Because you get the wrong person in there, they're running around smacking people on the knuckles and bitching about this person and that person and saying, oh my God, that's such a pain in the ass, as opposed to gracious and nice. And even when I would apologize because somebody didn't take care of something, she'd make an excuse for them, and it's like, no, they'll be fine,
And culture is so important, and maintaining that. What my organization I started in my garage, and now we're the largest in the world.
Wow.
When you bring a lot of people in, you expose yourself to those types of people. And unfortunately, I don't know, your experience is probably the same, I'd imagine, where sometimes you don't know that until you're in the middle of it with them, and see how they operate. And I 100% agree. Look, it's important to have skill, right? If you're going to hire a CFO or a CPA or something like that, or HR rep or compliance, they need to obviously have some skill in the industry and the position they're having. But I have always felt that, and I don't know the ratio per se, I think it depends on the person, but passion and quality and culture, man, it rates pretty high up there to even the skill,
Right, absolutely. And something, what we don't tolerate is negative emails. Like somebody, let's say they're not happy with somebody else, and they send them an email about something they did that they didn't appreciate, or they say something about somebody behind their back to someone else. We absolutely demand that people talk directly. Now, if they're in a different part of the country, at least talk on the phone or Zoom or something. But address something directly with people. It's so important in the culture, because if you don't, it's horrible. Let's say somebody gets an email telling them that they're a piece of crap in so many words.
Sure.
It's so bad for morale, and it hurts that individual.
Yeah.
And so, you need to stamp it out. Yeah. It just can't be allowed. And that's to my point about compliance. Other people in the compliance, like somebody doesn't do something, send out an email telling them to fucking get their ass in gear, but saying it in a way that's demeaning.
Right.
Because, people all put their core values up on the wall someplace, but respect is a core value for us, and we expect everybody to respect everybody else, whether it's a customer or another member of the team. You give them total respect. That's to be expected, and respect means you got a problem with somebody, you handle it directly. And we give people coaching in conflict resolution, and of course that's something you have to practice. Sure. It's very difficult it's very easy. You can write it down in a few short sentences how to do conflict resolution.
Application's different.
The application is a lot different, and it takes time. Yeah. And you have to be willing to fail and realize, oh my God, I left out that part.
Or maybe I'll take a breath before I hit the send button, right?
Right.
Larry, we look, you've been super successful. Your business has grown. You've developed a culture, a standard there that I think in this day and age, it's hard to find sometimes companies that have more than just a bottom line focus. And that's hard to develop too, because you want to make money too. You got into this business to make money.
Well, you have to.
Yeah, you got to, because you're not only employing yourself, but you've got thousands of employees that you have to protect and want them to wake up to a job the next day, and that's a lot of pressure for for an owner. That's a lot of pressure for a founder.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have to have faith. And by that, I mean, you have to have faith that if you're bringing in the right people and giving them the right tools, that the bottom line will be there. And I'm sure you're familiar with Hubert Joly. Are you?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Well, Hubert Joly wrote a book called The Heart of Business. And he wrote that after spending 7 years at Best Buy. And Best Buy back in 2012 was circling the drain.
Yeah.
And they brought him in. He had successfully been the CEO of a number of huge international companies prior to that. But he came in with that same philosophy. And the difference between him and me is, for me, it was my gut feeling. For him, it was the result of his years in business school and in business and in practice. And it was focus on the people. And the bottom line will take care of itself. And Best Buy became incredibly successful and still is to this day. And if you hire Best Buy and you say to them, you want somebody to put in a sound system for you, whoever shows up will be given it the heart and soul. Yeah. And that culture came from the top down. Yeah. And it was the focus on the people that saved Best Buy. That is now a really vibrant and successful company. Everybody said, oh, it's over for them. You know, Circuit City, Radio Shack, they all went down the drain, and Best Buy is heading in the same
direction. Yeah.
But no, they became successul, and that's a book I highly recommend, The Heart of Business by Hubert Joly.
That's a good recommendation. I can definitely look that up.
Absolutely.
You know, Larry, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. You've talked about your organization. You've talked about the people you hire. I want to talk about you. Now, as your favorite subject, right? No one likes to talk about themselves, especially. I mean, that's how I feel. But, you know, you grew a company from one truck to a nationally respected organization. That's amazing. This podcast is called The Leadership Evolution. And I believe that businesses, especially founders and their businesses, they all evolve, especially when they're very successful. You know, you start out as a startup, you know, charging $13 an hour, a lady that you're out there moving with her help, obviously, to where you're at right now. That evolution of business is much different than a personal founder's evolution. How did you have to evolve personally as a leader? What did that look like as your organization grew, and you're growing with it? But at some point, you know, you don't necessarily grow in different directions. You just grow differently. How has your role as leadership evolved differently?
Okay, well, you know, obviously when I started out, I was just trying to pay the rent, you know, and make a buck.
Sure.
But the fact is, you know, my father, growing up, he was so honest that it was embarrassing. Like, he would drive back to the supermarket because they didn't charge him for the potatoes that were in the bottom of the shopping cart.
Wow.
You know, he would actually go back to the bank with a pen if he took the teller's pen by accident.
Wow.
You know, and I used to think it was ridiculous. I remember once at the beach, we were the last people leaving, and there was a beautiful towel on the beach. And I picked it up. And as we're walking back across the boardwalk, he says to me, "This would be a nice place to leave the towel." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, if those people come back to get that towel, they'll see it right there." And I said, "Look, if I hadn't grabbed it, it would already be in the tide. The tide was going to come in over." Sure. And he said, I know something about that towel, actually. And I said, "Okay, what do you know about the towel?" And he says, "It's not yours." And so I grew up with ridiculing him for all this nonsense, lending money to people that there was no way in hell they were going to pay him back. And I said, "Well, what are you thinking?" And he'd say, "Well, if they don't pay me back, that's on them. You know, they're the ones that are establishing that." So somehow or another, it sunk in that I wasn't going to do anything that didn't line up with those kind of values. And I think you can't really have gray areas. It's either right or wrong, and you do the right thing. There's so many times when a customer might overpay by accident, you could just hold on to the money and hope they don't notice. And if they do, say, "Oh, sorry, I saw that. Here's send you a check," as opposed to, "Wait a minute, this person overpaid. Here you go." And no matter what it is, always doing the right thing.
All right.
And when I took on my partner, he was equally the same in, it didn't matter if it was $1,000 or 50 cents, we were going to do the right thing. So I think that was important in sort of, because while you're evolving with that. You're not evolving and saying, well, you got to compromise, because you see other people doing it. Maybe that's okay. And every time you in the old days, you'd pick up a newspaper, but now look at the amount of bad behavior that goes on in business. Right. Now, I know so many very ethical business owners, but where are all these other people coming from? And I think that so what in evolving, you have to have those values to begin with. I didn't think about it much until the company was growing, and then you want to set that in stone. But to me, a lot happened during that period when my partner was saying we should stay small. I gave it time to stop and really think about it. Not just growing because the phone is ringing and you're running around grabbing business, but thinking it through. What does it really mean to grow? And setting in stone how you're going to handle that from the beginning. Yeah. So that then you can evolve in a way you're going to be comfortable with. And you're not going to sort of compromise over time. I don't know if I've answered your question, but it is an evolution, because you do start out just trying to pay the rent and make a buck. But then you do have to evolve into how do you want to handle this?
Well, I think a lot of times too, there's no question when you start out, especially as a founder in a startup, you're wearing all the hats. You're answering all the questions. You're dealing with all the problems.
Right.
And as you evolve and your business evolves, right, there's more people that start coming into your organization, and those hats start coming off your head, right? And I think one of the biggest struggles founders have is facing or trusting others with the things that they've built. So how did you learn to delegate, while you're trying to maintain the culture and standard that mattered most to you? And you're bringing in new people that are now wearing the hat you've been wearing this whole time. How do you delegate that and while maintaining that culture?
Well, I think that's a great question, because when you hire somebody, you've got to start by training them how to do the job. And then it's almost overnight you go from doing that to letting them fly solo.
Yeah.
And allowing them to make mistakes. And that's a real challenge, and you're right. And it wasn't in my nature, because I think people that start companies, they want to do everything themselves.
Oh, yeah.
One of the hardest things for me with growth was, what I really loved was that period of time when I was wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
And to change myself into somebody who could professionally manage a growing company, I had to do a kind of a makeover in a way. And so I read a lot of books. I really gave it a lot of thought. That might be my skill set. But you're reading about the fact that how important delegation is, and it might be sort of against your instincts. But you know what? You know what really helps is saying to somebody when you're training them, the day is going to come when you're going to fly solo. And when that day comes and I'm still breathing down your neck, look me in the eye and tell me, why did you hire me if you're still trying to do my job?
Yeah.
And And when you say that to somebody, and that day does come, because I've had it happen, and people would say, okay, you hired me to do this. Are you going to keep micromanaging me? In other words, you've given them the license to say that to you.
Correct. That's good.
You've laid that out in advance, because it isn't really my nature to just, delegate. But you have to do that if you're going to succeed. And you have to be able to step back and let people do their job. And it is an evolution to be able to do that. But it helped me. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It helped me to be aware of that in advance. So
that's the problem. And one of the reasons why I created this podcast is because, you start out a company. We start a company because we see a problem or you see an opportunity,
right,
and you go with it. And you're all in. It's the build stage. You're all in. You go.
Right.
Well, you and this now entity, organization, process, thought, whatever you just created, you become one. Your identity fuses together. Now it's all you think about. It's all you talk about. It's all people know you about. Right. And I think that's important, because if it wasn't, it probably wouldn't grow, because you're just not passionate about it. But because it is, and because you're a great example of someone being, so passionate about and successful, this organization's grown. You're obviously you've identity fused with it in a lot of ways. And now as you're delegating and these hats come off, right? And this is the evolution about leadership and leaders and founders that I've always wanted to get to, because it's hard. It is against, I think, a founder's internal core to allow someone else to run with a portion of their dream
and make mistakes.
Yeah, and there is, and their mistakes, exactly. And there is an emotional feeling. There's an emotional reaction that a founder has, oftentimes very defensive or very negative, towards losing maybe a little bit of what feels like control over any particular part of their organization. And as my organization grew, all of a sudden there were meetings that were happening I wasn't invited to, and there was decisions that were going on that I didn't necessarily know about. Right. And which is all great. In fact, as a leader, owner, founder, I mean, that's all signs of great success and growth, because your organization doesn't need you in those regards anymore. What I wasn't ready for, Larry, was the feeling that it gave me. Did you ever have those disconnected, am I relevant type wounds? Right? Did you ever have those as your leadership evolved?
Well, you talked about not being in a meeting, but the other thing is people not wanting you there. And
that's a good point.
And here's the reason: because people won't say things when you're in the room, because much as it's hard to accept the fact that you're this 800-pound gorilla, in the sense that you're the CEO and everybody's afraid of you, people, no matter how gentle and kind you are, people exaggerate in their mind. Like if you say something to somebody, it's just amplified so many times. So
it's a much bigger weight than you ever intended.
Right, exactly. So if people can have meetings without you, they're more willing to bitch about something or bring to light something they're not happy about, that they might be afraid to say in front of the person that is, it's their baby, and they're afraid you might get upset. So that took a bit to understand, and sometimes people had to gently explain to me, maybe it'd be better off if you weren't there.
Well, that's it right there, isn't it? That's the point I'm talking about. I address and talk about a phenomenon called founder syndrome. Right. And founder syndrome is exactly these. It touches on these topics where, listen, as a leader, as a founder, as wearing all the hats, as answering all the questions for so many years, and now all of a sudden,
Yeah.
These questions are directed to someone else, and these answers are given by someone else, even without necessarily your consultation. And it's all signs of growth. It means,
Right.
yeah, it's getting bigger and bigger. But no one talks to the founders, and no one really addresses how that makes how that could make a founder feel, right? Because here I was, right, and I'm sure you're the same. You're making all the decisions.
Right.
You're in these meetings, and people are looking at you, and
Yeah.
as founders, we know that there's some answers that we get that are just answers for the founder, not maybe an honest answer, and I get that being out of those meetings, you get a little bit more honest answers from people, absolutely. But
I'll tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
It's when that those ideas and those meetings and those decisions that happen that you're not even consulted on, and because your company's big enough. Do you ever feel, I call them relevance wounds, right? Am I relevant anymore? Because am I even consulted? And oftentimes I think founders think that the quantity of need, it equals the quantity of value in a founder. And that's not necessarily true, right? Because just because you're taking hats off and you're quote less needed in those areas doesn't mean you're less valued.
Well, it has a lot to do with having the right people, because, if you have the wrong people, you just are afraid to let them make decisions because you don't trust them.
That's your baby.
I'll tell you a very funny story from when I was starting out, because of course I became a really expert mover. So when you're moving something, when somebody else would do something, and okay, it might be okay, but I'd have to explain, listen, if you keep doing it that way, sooner or later, there's going to be damage. You just got lucky. And so here's how you should do it. So I'd be explaining to people how to do things. But then there were situations where I would overhear when somebody didn't know I was in earshot, and they'd be coming over to correct somebody else, and they do an impersonation of me and imitating my voice. They say, well, what you should have done, and sometimes they put on an Irish accent, because I say, well, what you should have done was this. And of course, so in the early days, I was getting that message, of how to talk to people, and the fact that, I learned a lot from that, even though it was all in good fun, and
Sure.
I took no offense. People are doing their imitation of you, etc. But it did show me, look, I should take a slightly different approach. I should be a little different in that way. But you're right.
Which was requiring you, right, as the founder, to now evolve maybe a little outside of your normal character, your normal comfort zone, right?
Exactly, and let people do. I mean, I did have a situation where I just had to micromanage someone because she just was always, I guess she was so creative that she'd have all these crazy ideas, which were wonderful, but the more important stuff had to be done first. Yeah. And I ended up just offering her a generous severance. Sure. Because you have to be able to be confident. And if you feel like you can't trust the person's decision-making ability, you shouldn't have them there. They should be gone, And you need people that you trust. And then you have to step back and let them make mistakes. Because then, you know what? People are comfortable coming to you and asking for your advice if they're worried about a decision they're going to make. And that's very reassuring too. Yeah. And it's so much better when somebody asks you to do that than when you come barging in and telling them what they should have done, as opposed to they're asking you for how you do something, and then you can talk to them about it. But one other point I wanted to make, if there's time, is how you approach business. Because in our business, you're going to have accidents. Things are going to happen.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you try, a wall will get dinged or a scratch will happen. And then you have to make good to the customer. And we are absolutely committed to taking care of our customers. And so that's important that you make sure the people that are working in your company have that same approach. Because something I kept hearing from business owners was, you can't please all of the people all of the time. And there's always going to be those ones that, are impossible and yeah. And I said, no, we're going to satisfy every customer. Now, that means that some customers are going to really take advantage of you. That's true. Yeah. But you're not going to get your knickers in a knot and run away and get into a lawsuit. But becoming experts in, like I became an expert, like let's say you've got a crazy person who's demanding something nuts. I became an expert at least getting them to meet me halfway.
Yeah.
And even though I'm still eating a couple of $1,000s or whatever, I've got them off of their original demand.
Yeah.
And that's something that has to go down through your company, because we're committed to every customer being happy. And that's why we offer a money back guarantee. For instance, if someone is not happy with a worker, if they have a complaint, all the money back for that person, no questions asked. Yeah. Even if they're full of shit. That's what happens. And you have to live up to it. And also, when you say to your customers that you guarantee you'll give them money back on any employee, that holds your recruiting and training to the feet to the fire, because you are saying this person meets our standard or else you're giving money back. So you're going to be very careful about who you send out there.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to be certain of their character, for instance.
Sure. Larry, as we're kind of wrapping up here, and I want to get to your book. I got a couple of questions about that. But, looking back over more than four decades,
right?
Of business growth, leadership growth, success.
Oh dear. Things are
frozen to building or legacy.
You froze there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. So on this podcast, we often talk about the transition from building an organization to building legacy.
Okay.
What does a legacy mean to you today, and how has that definition changed over the years?
Well, I'd say.
Did you think about legacy, 40 years ago, or for me, when I built my organization, 14 years ago, I started it. I wasn't even thinking on the legacy terms. I was building and growing. Have you thought? I'm sure you're on in your years, especially in your organization. Yeah. Have you thought about legacy and how has that evolved as you've grown?
Well, when I started thinking about legacy was when I started getting solicited by people that wanted to buy the company. And I thought about how proud I was of what we had developed. And I saw so many other people who sold their companies that were really solid, only to have whoever bought it to trash the place, just trying to make a buck. And I realized that, we're all about people. So if I sold this business and somebody didn't keep our culture and values intact, that the whole place would go to hell in a handbasket. So I did decide that, I want this company to stand the test of time. And that meant that I took my right-hand man and asked him if he would be interested in taking over. And this was about, 15 years ago or so. And he said he was. So 5 years later, I said, okay, I want you to take over in 5 years. So for those 5 years, he went through every aspect of being a CEO. And then when that was done, he basically took over the CEO job, and that was 6 years ago. So he's buying out 51% of the shares over a course of 20 years, and he's 6 years into that. And of course, he has all the same value system I have. So of course I could have got 4 or 5 times as much money probably by selling on the open market. But the company is more valuable to me than money, actually.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my employees' father, was in the business of helping people invest money or something. And he was moving. And his son had told me many times, "Oh, my dad wants to talk to you." So when he was moving, I drove out there to, talk to him and had a nice conversation. And I told him what I was planning to do. And he says, "Well, what if the person who takes over, first of all, he wondered why I wouldn't sell the company." And he told me, and he looked at my car. I was driving a Prius at the time, and he said, "You could be driving a Ferrari, And I said, well, this company is my Ferrari. And he said, "Well, what if the person taking over drives your Ferrari into the ditch?"
It's a good question.
I said, "Well, that could happen, but I'm going to hope for the best there. That's the way I want to go." And he has been doing a fantastic job. The Ferrari is still on the course.
Still intact.
Yeah, it's still intact. I mean, obviously, I could have a lot more money, but what the hell? I mean, when you're 75, what do these people want all this fucking money for anyway? I'm sorry, but
just get you in trouble.
yeah. It's nice to be able to take vacations and have a nice place to live and everything, but why do you want all this other stuff? I mean, we move people who pay us. We had a move not long ago, $80,000. I mean, they were moving on to, I won't mention the name of the island,
Sure.
but basically,
Difficult move.
they're only there for 6 weeks of the year. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And that's that's a lot of ferry rides and everything else.
Sure.
For a place. I mean, who needs it? You don't need that crap. And I'm happy, we got the stuff.
Isn't that what it's about, though? I've always lived. I was about 35 when my light turned on, and when I realized that my measure of success was something I'm not going to say stupid because it is important, but not near as valuable as I thought it was, and that was the dollars behind my paycheck. I realized that's almost false success. It's almost false direction. And I grew up in a single parent home, right? My mom, 5 kids. We were poor. We didn't have much, and she pounded it in our heads: get to college, go get a good job, don't suffer like we did. And so of course I was, and I don't blame her for it. I get it, and I'm grateful the work ethic that put into me. But when I'm sitting at 35 kids, career, success doesn't necessarily mean fulfillment.
Right.
And I think that comes from passion. And when you find your passion, that turns into purpose. And, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have purpose, you're not going to be very happy. And you're just a great example. I wanted to ask you this before last thing we get to in your book. I want to know about that. So, this is a leadership podcast, and my goal is to help founders, CEOs deal with some of the growth pains that we feel, but also the internal personal struggle that we have as we build something that we've loved so much and then let it go. So if you were sitting across from a founder right now, Larry, who's like right in the middle of scaling their organization, and they're afraid of losing that, what made it so special, what advice would you give them to ensure that their mission outlives them?
Okay. Wow. Well, I think some people, they kind of try to grow too fast. Fine, if you can maintain the quality and the standard at the same time, that's great. And some people have been able to make that happen. But some people get too,
Wrapped around the axle.
yeah. Like, for instance, I remember when we had this great store here in Boston, Leechmere, and it just had this fabulous reputation, and everyone loved it. And we were near it. It's right on the Cambridge, very close to Boston. And then it was sold, and whoever bought it, all of a sudden they're opening Leechmere's all over the place. And you know what? They're going to go bankrupt. And guess what? They did. Mm-hmm. And now the original store, which if it had just been that store, would have still been great. But of course, it's ancient history now. Yeah. So instead of trying to open 6 stores, if they'd started with 1. But anyway, I'm just saying that's one piece of advice is if you really care about the quality. But I think you talked about people who are passionate and love their business. And I think there really are 2 kinds of CEOs, owners. And there are the ones who really are passionate and care about their business and love it. And then they're the ones, they may say that and think that, but they're just interested in the bottom line, that they just want to make money and that's it. And look, I don't think those people could give a rat's ass about their legacy, to be honest. I mean, they may say they are, but if you really care about your legacy, you're going to try to establish a culture that's going to be permanent and that's going to permeate everybody in your organization. And if somebody doesn't really measure up, like I was talking to one of my branch managers the other day, and we had hired somebody who seemed to have most of what we were looking for, but on moves, he would be complaining about stuff. And the other guys just said, we don't like working with this guy. So he basically got rid of him. I mean, sure, he was able to work hard and do the job, but that's toxic.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody there who is doing that, and you have to have managers like that manager who understands the value of that and knows the right thing to do is to move that person out the door and to do it quickly while they're still in their probationary period.
Yeah.
So you don't have a whole nasty bunch of trouble. Like a lot of people wait a couple of years and then they say, what do I do about this person? And you're thinking, well, wait a minute. Is this news? Nothing's changed. They were this bad when you first 3 months you had them. Why are they still here? It's because you weren't paying attention to that. You just hire somebody to fill a job, and then now you feel a sense of relief. Okay, I've taken care of that problem. They'll be fine, and you move on to something else. And you're not focused on the fact that you've got to watch people in their first month or two and make sure they're the right person, because that's when they need to be gotten out the door. Not
well, I think you're, to sum up that answer, culture and establishing and maintaining your culture, which is really your legacy. I mean, that you organized, developed, and grew a company based on how you like to run it, how you think it needs to be ran, the honesty, integrity that's behind the name, because that name represents you. I mean, really, that's the ups and the downs of being identity fused with your organization. Right. It's your name. I tell people, listen, there's 99.9% of the people on the planet that know Luke Mickelson only knows him because of Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I mean, I'm just the guy that started the organization. That's all about they know about him. And if you could be the greatest guy in the world, but if your organization turns into crap, that's a hard thing for us founders. And I think that's why it becomes so personal. I remember the day when I wasn't invited to a meeting, or things were happening and I wasn't consulted on. I was happy for it, but you also as a founder have this worry, because those guys don't have to worry about legacy. This is our legacy. You know, this is my name for kingdom come. I mean, so if Sleep in Heavenly Peace ultimately ends up in a bad name, or, you know, we're a nonprofit, it's hard to keep that a good name for a nonprofit forever. You know, that's ultimately you know, and that's hard unless you're a founder and unless you're focused on legacy. And like you said, there's people that aren't. They just care about the bottom dollar, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you really care about your legacy, right, I that's a great answer. I think culture becomes something that is far more important later on than necessarily the dollars that you come in. Of course, you want it to be successful, but I love that answer, Larry.
Yeah, but you got to make people own it too. Like they take as much pride in it as you do, and they feel like it's theirs as well. And we let people know that if we are beat our budget numbers, that we're going to share anything above our gross profit budget. We're going to share it back with the employees, and they're going to get that money. And make them feel like this is theirs. This is theirs as much as it's ours.
Right. Larry, you wrote a book, and I want to get this. I want you to have a chance to share your thoughts about this. I think it's so needed nowadays, especially with your culture and your ethics and standards that you have raised in your business. I mean, it's something that is going away in this day and age. But heavy lifting, building a business with a giant heart, I think it's right down my alley. Mm-hmm. You know, what was the motivation behind it? How's it doing? What do you want people to get out of it?
Well, it probably started quite a while ago with people saying you've got to do a better job of telling your story. So I started by hiring somebody to help me, but the result was terrible, and because I I never did very well in English class.
Me neither.
And I thought, how can I write a book?
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what, I can do better than this.
Yeah.
So I wrote one myself, and I wasn't happy with it. So it took several do-overs. I mean, there's so much stuff you put into a book that you really need to take out. Okay, I think we don't really need talk about.
You throw up your ideas and then you start.
Yeah. So you kind of winnow it down to what's really important.
Yeah.
Because you can go down a lot of rabbit trails that might be important to you, but you've got to think about the reader. And so I wanted to tell the story, but I wanted to also set a marker in the ground for my employees themselves. Like, this is what you're representing. So we like them to read the book and take pride. Like, is it slightly aspirational here and there? Are we missing the mark? This is where we want to be. We feel we're there, but culture is something that is hard to maintain. Like Van Gogh, Rubens, and all these people, they painted these beautiful pictures, and hundreds of years later, people can look at them and they're still there. But when you create an organization that might be an equally great work of art, the paint's running down the canvas, and you're pushing it back up, because you're constantly working on that culture, because it's difficult to maintain, because it's people. And you have to be thinking about that all the time. Yeah. And you have to get people to basically feel like they are as proud of it as you are. Yeah. So our culture, we call it the giant heart, where heart are honesty, enthusiasm, above and beyond, respect, and teamwork. But we take that so seriously, and we judge people on that, and we look, here's the giant heart. And the person I told you that got let go there recently by my manager lacked the enthusiasm that is an absolute requirement.
Yeah. Where can they get the book? Where do they find it, Larry? And
well, it's available on Amazon. heavy lifting, building a business with a giant heart, or my name, Larry O'Toole. It's available on Amazon and people can buy it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Larry, you've been fabulous. This is great.
Thank you.
Your story is hey, it's an inspiration to those founders that are just starting out, that want to look for, hey, how do I make an organization that is loved, that is successful, and something I can be proud of?
Right.
And there's probably, I don't think there's a better example than you, Larry. It's funny. You're from Ireland, right?
Right.
What part of Ireland?
Well, actually, all my people are from Clare, but I was born in Dublin and went to school there. But I think of myself as a Clare man. But
okay. My dad.
I'm going back. Yeah, I'm going back to Ireland in a couple of weeks, and basically, when I'm in Dublin, I have a Dublin accent. I have a Clare accent. So, it's sort of, I don't even notice it, but when I'm talking to the people, it comes back.
Yeah.
You were saying,
I noticed it just a little bit because my dad, who's actually my stepdad, but he's been my dad for 25 years. I got off my mission. He hired me. He came from Belfast, $100 in his pocket, and has built a very, very successful business. Taught me everything I know about business, and just an amazing man. So I have a soft part in my heart for Ireland. We were just there, 2 years ago, and did the Northern Ireland tour, and it's obviously a beautiful country. But, Larry, thanks for being on. Your advice, your experience is amazing. And as soon as I read this, I said, listen, this is a guy that I feel like I try to emanate your passion and your desire for good culture. And I wanted my audience to hear that too. So thank you for being on, and we look forward to reading the book and hear more about it. So
great, Luke. Great talking to you. Thanks so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. We'd hire you in a heartbeat.
Thank you for joining me on the Leadership Evolution podcast. If something in today's conversation challenged you, stretched you, or made you think a little differently, that's the point. Growth always starts with awareness. And if you are struggling in your journey, if you feel like you are fading away from what you have built, visit my website, lukemickelson.com, and learn how you can take back your confidence and create lasting legacy. If you found value in this episode, please share it with another leader who may be in the middle of their own evolution. And remember, your role as a leader isn't just to build something successful. It's to build something that lasts. Build what outlives you.